Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and the UK government has responded by suspending aid to the main humanitarian organisation supporting Palestinians. Many people have expressed shock and disbelief at this decision, and one of the only ways I feel you can understand it is if you look at the power that the Israel lobby now has over Britain's ruling party. Joining me today to discuss this is my colleague Matt Kennard.
Good to be with you, Phil.
We've been publishing a series of articles about the Israel lobby. Last week we focused on Labour Friends of Israel, and this week we've switched our focus to Conservative Friends of Israel. Our colleague John McAvoy found that 9 Conservative MPs took money from the Israel lobby amid the Gaza genocide to go out on a trip to Israel. And they even met with Israel's president, who is someone who's named in the International Court of Justice ruling as someone who appears to be promoting genocide.
Yeah, I mean, John's story is just the continuation of the same dynamic that's been happening for decades in this country, whereby these opaque groups, because Conservative Friends of Israel and Labour Friends of Israel don't disclose their funders, these opaque groups pay for British elected politicians to go to Israel, Palestine, Israel, and then some are taken on tours of the West Bank, propaganda tours. John found that the lobby's activities have not stopped in the face of the genocide, and they've paid for Conservative Friends of Israel, alongside another group called the European Leadership Network, have taken 9 Tory MPs to Israel in the midst of the genocide and paid £20,000 to put them out there. We have actually elected politicians in this country ventriloquizing the propaganda of a foreign power, which is actually not an ally. It's a hostile country in many cases in terms of its interference in our democracy.
The way it's drawing us into these conflicts in the Middle East, confrontation with Iran, with Yemen, HMS Diamond, this Royal Navy destroyer that we've sent to the Red Sea to essentially backfill the job that Israel's Navy should be doing, came under drone attack at the weekend. There's hundreds of crews' lives on board, arguably put at risk there. So it just shows a complete kind of degree of influence that this Israel lobby is having over particularly the Conservative Party, where around 80% of Conservative MPs are members of Conservative Friends of Israel. I went to the National Archives in southwest London and I looked through, there's a whole series of Foreign Office files called the Pro-Israel Lobby. And these are notes from British diplomats in London and in Israel with their kind of encounters, meetings that they've had with groups like Conservative Friends of Israel. And I was going through them, and in the article that I've just written for Declassified Today, I found that they said one of the funders of Conservative Friends of Israel had been this organisation called the Jewish Agency, which predates the creation of the State of Israel. It's one of the kind of national institutions of Israel now. It's part and parcel of the World Zionist Organization. The Jewish Agency itself, its role has been to promote migration to Israel, and it also helps people who have migrated to join the Israeli military. And there's this fascinating document that I found from 1990 where they say it's a meeting between I think a foreign office minister and the chairman of Conservative Friends of Israel, and he says that they had to take money from the Jewish Agency, and that it had become, Conservative Friends of Israel had become virtually a Likud office in London. Likud referring to what is now Netanyahu's ruling party. Are you surprised by that, Matt, that this was a source of one of their fundings? It's not the Israeli state itself, but it's kind of a parastatal organization with incredibly close ties to the Israeli state.
I can't say I'm surprised. It's great that you found the documentation, though, because I'm not. Is that the first time that there's actually been any kind of evidence of who funds Conservative Friends of Israel?
Beyond possibly some individual kind of tycoons who've been linked to it, funding it in some shape or form over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising to me, but it's great to have it on record, and it goes to show that it's not a coincidence that CFI, Conservative Friends of Israel, just come out with exactly the government lines of the State of Israel at all times. And you've seen it in the Gaza genocide, but in the previous aggressions in Gaza in 2014, 2009, 2021, they've always taken the side of the Israeli state and always ventriloquized their propaganda. They've also been a key player in destroying any um, uh, British political figure who contradicts the Likudnik line. One of them is Alan Duncan, who was foreign minister from 2016 to 2019, but was foreign minister for Europe and the Americas because his appointment as Middle East minister was vetoed by Conservative Friends of Israel and Lord Polak. And he said in his diaries that the only reason he was vetoed by CFI was because he believes in the human rights of Palestinians and believes in a two-state solution, which is what the stated position of the British government is. But it's obviously not what the Likudniks want. They want Israeli control from the river to the sea, which is in their original documentation. So, yes, it's great to have it on record. Hopefully, this will spark some kind of curiosity from the mainstream media about these institutions, because we have I mean, we're an alternative media site. We're two reporters, just me and you, 4 staff in total. And we've done more than everyone combined to expose the reality of the Israel lobby in this country. We're inundated with stories, a lot of them made up, about Russian influence in this country. And you've got this lobby which is overruling prime ministers and creating whole invented scandals in this country, which they just don't touch. And I think that journalists who see your work here revealing for the first time the sort of parastatal Israeli funding of the Conservative Friends of Israel will wake some journalists up and think maybe we should have a look into this, because the only reason we're in this situation is because journalists aren't doing their job. They thrive, CFI and LFI, on their secrecy and the lack of curiosity from journalists. I think when light is shone on their activities, they'll wither.
If you're watching this and you like the work that we're doing on exposing the Israel lobby's influence in British politics, please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. And you can also head to our website, declassifieduk.org, where you can start supporting us from as little as £3 a month. Matt, you just mentioned someone there called Lord Polak, Stuart Polak. So in the files I found from 1990, he'd just been made the director of Conservative Friends of Israel, and he'd hold that role until 2015 when he was put in the House of Lords, and he's now the honorary president of CFI. And what I found in those files from the early 90s was that he was already rubbing British diplomats up the wrong way. One of them said that he might be dangerous. They said he was spreading poison about another diplomat and making snide remarks. And in particular, he seemed to have a campaign going against the British Consul General in Jerusalem, which is separate to the ambassador in Tel Aviv. The Consul General represents the UK in the occupied Palestinian territories. Traditionally, they've been more outspoken and critical of Israel's illegal settlement building. You'll often see them issue a statement when there is some kind of settler violence or this kind of thing. And Polak appeared to be kind of trying to undermine the consul general, the current, the incumbent at the time, but also the files say that in general the Israelis had an axe to grind against the fact this office even existed. And at that point, it was because he said the PLO, the official representative of the Palestinians, was not a terrorist organization, which Polak took great umbrage at. You can imagine now, the organization that they're going after is UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency. And so there's just this pattern of every time there's anyone who kind of stands up to the state of Israel's aggression against the Palestinians, the lobby then swings into action to try and delegitimize them. So that's the documentary evidence I found in the National Archives. The full article is on our website.
Polak's an interesting figure, isn't he? Because he was also the person who organized Priti Patel's off-radar meetings with dozen, I think it was more than a dozen Israeli officials, including Netanyahu. When she was a British minister, she went to Israel apparently on holiday, and while she was a minister for international development, and met all these people, organized by Stuart Polak. Came back, and it was a scandal briefly, but he he retained his position. There was no, like, it was a very small scandal, and in fact, they didn't name CFI, and they didn't that Polak as an individual wasn't really focused on, and he should have been. That should have ended her career. I mean, she was reappointed to another ministerial position soon after. But that is such an outrageous thing to do when you're a British minister, to go on a family holiday, which isn't a family holiday, and have secret meetings with government officials of a foreign state. But again, there is an exception for Israel on all this stuff, including the genocide in Gaza and international law, but especially in the diplomatic relationship. They get away with stuff that no one else could get away with. And that has to change, because, as you said in your introduction, a large part of the reason we are where we are, which is that we have a government which is giving completely loyal support to Israel as it conducts its genocide in Gaza, including spy flights and arms and everything else, is because this lobby is out of control. And British ministers are not making decisions at all times in the interests of the British people and the British state. They're making them often in the interest of a foreign state, Israel specifically. And that's because we have these out of control lobby groups that need to be exposed. And hopefully it has to change now. If it doesn't change now, it never will.